Okay, so today we are doing Judges chapter 15 through 19. And I'm going to go ahead and get started on reading. All right. Just a second. Okay, so chapter 15. After a while, in the time of harvest, after a while, in the time of wheat harvest, it happened that Samson visited his wife with a young goat, and he said, "Let me go into my wife, into her room." But her father would not permit him to go. Her father said, "I really thought that you thoroughly hated her. Therefore, I gave her to your companion. Is not her younger sister better than she?" And Samson said to them, "This time I shall be blameless regarding the Philistines if I harm them." Then Samson went up and caught 300 foxes, and he took torches, turned the foxes tail to tail, and put a torch between each pair of tails. When he had set the torches on fire, he let the foxes go into the standing grain of the Philistines and burned up both the shocks and the standing grain, as well as the vineyards and the olive groves. Then the Philistines said, "Who has done this?" And they answered, "Samson, the son-in-law of the Timonite, because he has taken his wife and given her to his companion." So the Philistines came up and burned her and her father with fire. Good afternoon. Samson said to them, "Since you would do a thing like this, I will surely take revenge on you, and after that I will cease." So he attacked them, hip and thigh, with a great slaughter. Then he went down and dwelt in the cleft of the rock of Etam. Now the Philistines went up and camped in Judah and deployed themselves against Lehi. And the men of Judah said, "Why have you come up against us?" So they answered, "We have come up to arrest Samson, to do to him as he has done to us." Then 3,000 men of Judah went down to the cleft of the rock Etam and said to Samson, "Do you not know that the Philistines rule over us? What is this that you have done to us?" And he said to them, "As they did to me, so I have done to them." But they said to him, "We have come down to arrest you, that we may deliver you into the hand of the Philistines." Then Samson said to them, "Swear to me that you will not kill me yourselves." So they spoke to him, saying, "No, but we will tie you securely and deliver you into their hand, but we will surely not kill you." And they bound him with 2 new ropes and brought him back from the rock. When he came to Lehi, the Philistines came shouting against him. Then the Spirit of the Lord came mightily upon him, and the ropes that were upon his arms became like flax that is burned with fire, and his bonds broke loose from his hands. He found a fresh jawbone of a donkey, reached out his hand and took it and killed 1,000 men with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey, heaps upon heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey, I have slain 1,000 men." And so it was, when he had finished speaking, that he threw the jawbone from his hand and called that place Ramoth Lehi. Verse 18, then he became very thirsty, so he cried out to the Lord and said, "You have given this great deliverance by the hand of your servant, and now shall I die of thirst and fall into the hand of the uncircumcised?" So God split the hollow place that is in Lehi, and water came out, and he drank it, and his spirit returned, and he revived. Therefore he called its name En Hakor, which is in Lehi to this day. And he judged Israel 20 years in the days of the Philistines. Chapter 16. Now Samson went to Gaza and saw a harlot there and went in to her. When the Gazites were told, "Samson has come here," they surrounded the place and lay in wait for him all night at the gate of the city. they were quiet all night, saying, in fact, in the morning, when it is daylight, we will kill him. And Samson lay low until midnight. Then he arose at midnight, took hold of the doors of the gate of the city and the two gateposts, pulled them up, bar and all, put them on his shoulders, and carried them to the top of the hill that faces Hebron. Afterward, it happened that he loved a woman in the valley of Sorek, whose name was Delilah. And the lords of the Philistines came to her and said to her, entice him and find out where his great strength lies, and by what means we may overpower him, that we may bind him to afflict him, and every one of us will give you 1,100 pieces of silver. So Delilah said to Samson, please tell me where your great strength lies, and with what you may be bound to afflict you. Thank you for subscribing. And Samson said to her, if they bind me with 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. So the lords of the Philistines brought, thank you so much. So the lords of the Philistines brought up her 7 fresh bowstrings, not yet dried, and she bound him with them. Now men were lying in wait, staying with her in the room, and she said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he broke the bowstrings as a strand of yard breaks when it touches fire. So the secret of his strength was not known. Then Delilah said to Samson, look, you have mocked me and told me lies. Yes, it does. Now please tell me what you may be bound with. So he said to her, if they bind me securely with new ropes that have never been used, then I shall become weak and be like any other man. Therefore Delilah took new ropes and bound him with them, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. And the men were lying in wait, staying in the room, but he broke them off his arms like a thread. Like, come on, Samson. Seriously? She asked him. He gave her an answer, obviously because he didn't trust her. She did the thing, and he got out. Not once, but twice. Like, I would have been done after that second time. Like, oh no, you're trying to set me up. I don't know what you got going on. But he continues. This is crazy. 13. Delilah said to Samson, until now you have mocked me and told me lies. Tell me what you may be bound with. And he said to her, if you weave the 7 locks of my head into the web of the loom. So she wove it tightly with the batten of the loom, and said to him, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. But he awoke from his sleep and pulled out the batten and the web from the loom. Like, that's 3 times already. Then she said to him, how can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? This is like, what? I'm sorry. Like, this is the conversations that they're having. This is crazy. How can you say I love you when your heart is not with me? You have mocked me for these 3 times and have not told me where your great strength lies. And it came to pass when she pestered him daily with her words and pressed him so that his soul was vexed to death. Then he told her all his heart, and he said to her, no razor has ever come upon my head, for I have been a Nazarite to God from my mother's womb. If I am shaven, then my strength will leave me, and I shall become weak and be like any other man. When Delilah saw that he had told her all of his heart, she sent and called for the lords of the Philistines, saying, come up once more, for he has told me all his heart. So the lords of the Philistines came up to her and brought the money in their hand. Then she lulled him asleep on her knees and called for a man and had him shave off the 7 locks of his head. Then she began to torment him, and his strength left him. And she said, the Philistines are upon you, Samson. So he awoke from his sleep and said, I will go out as before at other times and shake myself free. But he did not know that the Lord had departed from him. Then the Philistines took him and put out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza. They bound him with bronze fetters, and he became a grinder in the prison. Isn't it so interesting that he had a less problem? He had a less problem. He kept choosing these women, and he kept being ensnared by these women, and they took his eyes. They took his eyes. That is wild. And honestly, that kind of justifies like people's testimonies of hell and how people are punished depending on what their sins are. It kind of justifies that, because he's literally being hurt or hit in the area, you know, that he had the most problem in, you know, lust. That's crazy. Yes, the woman did defeat him. Verse 23, now the lords of the Philistines gathered together to offer a great sacrifice to Dagon, their god, and to rejoice. And they said, our God has delivered into our hands Samson, our enemy. But the people saw him, when the people saw him, they praised their God. For they said, our God has delivered into our hands our enemy, the destroyer of our land, and the one who multiplied our dead. So it happened when their hearts were merry that they said, call for Samson, that he may perform for us. So it wasn't enough to take his eyes and all of that. Now they got to embarrass him. Isn't that how the enemy does with us? He doesn't just want to expose us. He wants to bring embarrassment. Call for Samson, that he may perform for us. So they called for Samson from the prison, and he performed for them. And they stationed him between the pillars. Then Samson said to the lad who held him up by the hand, let me fill the pillars which support the temple, so that I can lean on them. Now the temple was full of men and women. All the lords of the Philistines were there, about 3,000 men and women on the roof watching while Samson performed. Then Samson called to the Lord, saying, O Lord, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me, I pray, just this once, O God, that I may with one blow take vengeance upon the Philistines for my 2 eyes. And Samson took hold of the 2 middle pillars which supported the temple, and he braced himself against them, one on his right and the other on his left. Then Samson said, let me die with the Philistines. And he pushed with all of his might, and the temple fell on the lords and the people who were in it. So the dead that he killed in his death were more than he killed while he was alive. And his brothers and all of his father's household came down and took him and brought him up and buried him between Zorah and Eshtal in the tomb of his father Manoah. He had judged Israel 20 years. That's so sad. So sad. Verse 17, now there was a man from the mountains of Ephraim whose name was Micah. And he said to his mother, the 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, and on which you put a curse, even saying it in my ears, here is the silver with me. I took it, and the mother said, may you be blessed by the Lord, my son. Yes, that was the key thing. God departed from Samson. That's the key right there. Yep. And then he repented and asked the Lord for help, and the Lord helped him at the very end. Verse 3, so when he had returned the 1,100 shekels of silver to his mother said, I had wholly dedicated the silver from my hand to the Lord for my son to make a carved image and a molden image. Now therefore I will return it to you. Thus he returned the silver to his mother. Then his mother took 200 shekels of silver and gave them to the silversmith, and he made it into a carved image and molden image, and they were in the house of Micah. The man Micah had a shrine and made an ephod and house idols, and he consecrated one of his sons who became his priest. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. Now, there was a young man from Bethlehem in Judah, of the family of Judah. He was a Levite and was staying there. The man departed from the city of Bethlehem in Judah to stay wherever he could find a place. Then he came to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, as he journeyed. And Micah said to him, "Where do you come from?" So he said, "I am a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I am on my way to find a place to stay." Micah said to him, "Dwell with me and be a father and priest to me, and I will give you 10 shekels of silver per year, a suit of clothes, and your sustenance." So the Levite went in. Then the Levite was content to dwell with the man. The young man became like one of his sons. So Micah consecrated the Levite, and the young man became his priest and lived in the house of Micah. Then Micah said, "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since I have a Levite priest." So he wasn't crazy. He knew that this man was a Levite. Chapter 18. In those days there was no king in Israel, and in those days the tribe of the Danites was seeking an inheritance for itself to dwell in, for until that day their inheritance among the tribes of Israel had not fallen to them. So the children of Dan sent 5 men of their family from their territory, men of valor, from Zorah to Eshtaol, to spy out the land and search it. And they said to them, "Go search the land." So they went to the mountains of Ephraim, to the house of Micah, and lodged there. While they were at the house of Micah, they recognized the voice of the young Levite. They turned aside and said to him, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place? What do you have here?" And he said to them, "Thus and so Micah did for me. He has hired me, and I have become his priest." So they said to him, "Please inquire of God, that we may know whether the journey on which we go will be prosperous." And the priest said to them, "Go in peace, the presence of the Lord be with you on your way." So the 5 men departed and went to Laish. They saw the people who were there, how they dwelt in safety in the manner of the Sidonians, quiet and secure. There were no rulers in the land who might put them to shame for anything. They were far from the Sidonians and had no ties with anyone. Then the spies came back to their brethren at Zorah Eshtaol, and their brethren said to them, "What is your report?" So they said, "Arise, let us go up against them, for we have seen the land, and indeed it is very good. Would you do nothing? Do not hesitate to go and enter and possess the land. When you go, you will come to a secure place and a large land, for God has given it into your hands, a place where there is no lack of anything that is in the earth." And so 600 men of the family of the Danites went there from Zorah to Ashtaol, armed with weapons of war. Then they went up and encamped in Kirath Jearim in Judah. Therefore they call that place Mane Dan to this day. There it is, west of Kirath Jearim. And they passed from there to the mountains of Ephraim and came to the house of Micah. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy out the country of Laish answered and said to their brethren, "Do you know that there are in these houses an ephod, household idols, a carved image, and a molten image? Now therefore consider what you should do." So they turned aside there and came to the house of the young Levite man, to the house of Micah, and greeted him. The 600 men armed with their weapons of war, who were the children of Dan, stood by the entrance of the gate. Then the 5 men who had gone to spy the land went up. Entering there, they took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image. The priest stood at the entrance of the gate with the 600 men who were armed with weapons of war. When these men went into Micah's house and took the carved image, the ephod, the household idols, and the molten image, the priest said to them, "What are you doing?" And they said to him, "Be quiet, put your hand over your mouth, and come with us. Be a father and priest to us. Is it better for you to be a priest to the household of one man, or that you be a priest to a tribe and a family in Israel?" So the priest's heart was glad, and he took the ephod, the household idols, and the carved image, and took his place among the people. Then they turned and departed and put the little ones, the livestock, and the goods in front of them. When they were a good way away from the house of Micah, the men who were in the houses near Micah's house gathered together and overtook the children of Dan. And they called out to the children of Dan. So they turned around and said to Micah, "What ails you that you have gathered such a company?" So he said, "You have taken away my gods, which I made, and the priests, and you have gone away. Now what more do I have? How can you say to me, 'What ails you?'" And the children of Dan said to him, "Do not let your voice be heard among us, lest angry men fall upon you, and you lose your life with the lives of your household." Then the children of Dan went their way, and when Micah saw that they were too strong for him, he turned and went back to his house. So they took the things Micah had made, and the priests who had belonged to them, and went to Laish, a people quiet and secure, and they struck him with the edge of the sword, and burned the city with fire. There was no deliverer because it was far from Sidon, and they had no ties with anyone. It was in the valley that belongs to Beth Rehob. So they rebuilt the city and dwelt there, and they called the name of the city Dan, after the name of Dan their father, who was born in Israel. However, the name of the city formerly was Laish. Then the children of Dan set up for themselves the carved image, and Jonathan the son of Gershom, the son of Manasseh, and his sons were priests to the tribe of Dan until the day of the captivity of the land. So they set up for themselves Micah's carved image, which he made, all the time that the house of God was in Shiloh. Chapter 19, and I think this is, the last one for today. And it came to pass in those days, when there was no king in Israel, that there was a certain Levite staying in the remote mountains of Ephraim. He took for himself a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah. But his concubine played the harlot against him and went away from him to her father's house at Bethlehem in Judah, and was there 4 whole months. Then her husband arose and went after her to speak kindly to her and bring her back, having his servant and a couple of donkeys with him. So she brought him into her father's house, and when the father of the young woman saw him, he was glad to meet him. Now his father-in-law, the young woman's father, detained him and stayed with him 3 days. So they ate and drank and lodged there. Then it came to pass on the 4th day that they arose early in the morning and stood to depart. But the young woman's father said to his son-in-law, "Refresh your heart with a morsel of bread, and afterward go your way." So they sat down, and the 2 of them ate and drank together. Then the young woman's father said to the man, "Please be content to stay all night, and let your heart be merry." And when the man stood to depart, his father-in-law urged him, so he lodged there again. Then he arose early in the morning on the 5th day to depart. But the young woman's father said, "Please refresh your heart." So they delayed until afternoon, and both of them ate. And when the man stood to depart, he and his concubine and his servant, his father-in-law, the young woman's father, said, "Look, the day is now drawing toward evening. Please spend the night. See, the day is coming to an end. Lodge here that your heart may be merry. Tomorrow go your way early so that you may get home." However, the man was not willing to spend that night, so he arose and departed and came opposite of Jebus, that is, Jerusalem. With him were 2 saddled donkeys, and his concubine was also with him. They were near Jebus, and the day was far spent. And the servant said to his master, "Come, please, let us turn aside into this city of the Jebusites and lodge in it." But his master said to him, "We will not turn aside here to a city of foreigners who are not of the children of Israel. We will go on to Gibeah." So he said to his servant, "Come, let us draw near one of these places and spend the night in Gibeah or Ramah." And they passed by and went their way, and the sun went down on them near Gibeah, which belongs to Benjamin. They turned aside there to go into the lodge of Gibeah. And when he went in, he sat in the open square of the city, for no one would take them into his house to spend the night. Just then an old man came in from his work in the field at evening, who was also from the mountains of Ephraim. He was staying at Gibeah, whereas the men of the place were Benjamites. And when he raised his eyes, he saw the traveler in the open square of the city. And the old man said, "Where are you going, and where do you come from?" So he said to him, "We are passing from Bethlehem in Judah toward the remote mountains of Ephraim. I am from there. I went to Bethlehem in Judah. Now I'm going to the house of the Lord, but there is no one who will take me into his house. Although we have both straw and fodder for our donkeys, and bread and wine for ourselves, for your female servant, and for the young man who is with you, there is no lack of anything." And the old man said, "Peace be with you. However, let all of your needs be my responsibility. Only do not spend the night in the open square." So he brought him into his house and gave him fodder for the donkeys, and they washed their feet and ate and drank. As they were enjoying themselves, suddenly certain men of the city, perverted men, surrounded the house and beat on the door. They spoke to the master of the house, the old man, saying, "Bring out the man who came to your house, that we may know him carnally." But the man, the master of the house, went out to them and said, "No, my brethren, I beg you, do not act so wickedly. Seeing this man has come into my house, do not commit this outrage. Look, here is my virgin daughter and the man's concubine. Let me bring them out, humble them, and do to them as you please. But to this man do not do such a vile thing." But the men would not heed him. So the man took his concubine and brought her out to them. And they knew her and abused her all night until morning. And when the day began to break, they let her go. Then the woman came as the day was dawning and fell down on the door of the man's house where her master was until it was light. When her master arose in the morning and opened the doors of the house and went out to go his way, there was his concubine fallen at the door of the house with her hands on the threshold. And he said to her, "Get up, let us be going." But there was no answer. So the man lifted her onto the donkey, and the man got up and went to his place. When he entered his house, he took a knife, laid hold of his concubine, and divided her into 12 pieces, limb by limb, and sent her throughout all the territory of Israel. And so it was, all who saw it said, "No such deed had been done or seen from the day that the children of Israel came up out of the land of Egypt until this day. Consider it, confer, and speak up." Isn't that something? They said nothing like this has been done since Egypt. Whew. Heavy, heavy, heavy. Okay, so let me pull up my notes real quick. I know. I'm just like, whoo. Oh, the people did what was right in their own eyes. This is what happens when lawlessness enters a land. There's no justice. Everybody is perverted. Oh my gosh. Whew. Judges chapter 15. Samson, fire, revenge, and God's purpose through imperfect vessels. Samson returns to his wife only to discover her father gave her to another man. In anger, Samson catches 300 foxes, ties torches to their tails, and burns the Philistine fields. The Philistines retaliate. Samson fights back. The men of Judah even bind Samson and hand him over to the Philistines, choosing peace with the enemy over confrontation. When the Spirit of the Lord comes upon him, Samson breaks his rope and kills 1,000 Philistines with a donkey's jawbone. God provides water miraculously from a hollow place to relieve him, which is like unheard of. The jawbone symbolizes God using the ordinary to accomplish the extraordinary. Judah's fear reflects a people comfortable with bondage. Samson's strength is divine. God works through him even in his flaws. God can use our imperfect moments to bring his perfect purposes forward in our lives. And the leadership truth of this chapter is that leaders must confront what others tolerate and depend on God for strength when the battle drains them. Judges 16, Samson and Delilah, strength without discipline leads to downfall. Samson visits a prostitute in Gaza, and God still uses him despite spiritual compromise. But this sets the stage for Delilah. Delilah manipulates Samson repeatedly, testing his heart until he reveals the secret of his strength, his uncut Nazarite hair symbolizing his covenant with God. Samson falls asleep in her lap, the lap of the very enemy assigned to destroy him. His hair is cut and his strength leaves, and he wakes up unaware that the Lord had departed. The Philistines gouge out his eyes and imprison him. But in captivity, Samson's hair begins to grow. In his final act, he prays for strength one more time, pushes apart the pillars of the Philistine temple, and brings judgment on Israel's enemies, killing more at his death than in his life. The loss of hair represents a broken covenant. Blindness represents spiritual blindness. His final prayer reveals God's mercy, that even when leaders fall, repentance restores strength. Compromise blinds us, but repentance restores us. The leadership truth of this chapter is that leaders lose influence gradually, not suddenly, though through small compromises that erode covenant identity. Judges 17, Micah's household idolatry, everyone doing what was right in their own eyes. A man named Micah steals silver from his mother, returns it, and together they create a carved idol. Micah builds a private shrine, or ordains his own son as a priest, which is like false fire, and then hires a wandering Levite to legitimize his idol. So he was a man that was able to be sold. This chapter repeats the haunting theme. In those days, there was no killing in Israel. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. Micah represents religious rebellion, homemade religion that uses God's terminology but rejects his authority. This is the beginning of Israel's spiritual and moral degradation. You cannot create your own version of God and still expect his blessings. The leadership truth of this chapter is that leaders guard truth fiercely because mixture begins in homes long before it appears in nations. So we wonder what's going on in the nation. It starts right at home. Judges 18, the tribe of Dan steals a priest and an idol. The tribe of Dan, failing to fully possess its inheritance, searches for an easier territory. They discover Micah's idol and priest and steal both. The priest readily abandons Micah's home when he is offered influence, proving that his heart was never aligned with God. Dan conquers a peaceful people, renames the city, and sets up Micah's idol as its official shrine. Dan's story reveals the danger of spiritual laziness, looking for easy possession instead of conquering what God originally assigned. A priest without conviction symbolizes leadership without a calling. Taking shortcuts spiritually leads to counterfeit victories, and they don't last. Leadership truth. Leaders who seek personal elevation over God's will become tools for idolatry and not for righteousness. Judges 19. The Levite's concubine, a nation without spiritual restraint. One of the darkest chapters in Scripture. A Levite takes a concubine who leaves him. He retrieves her, but on their journey home, they stop at Gibeah, a Benjamite town. During the night, wicked men surround the house, demanding the Levite be handed over. Instead, the concubine is given to them and abused all night and dies at the door. The Levite cuts her body into 12 pieces and sends them to Israel's tribes, sparking horror and outrage. This chapter shows the complete moral collapse of Israel without godly leadership. The Levite, who should have been spiritual, behaves selfishly, and Benjamin's city mirrors Sodom's depravity. Sin left unchecked becomes national corruption. When God's word is abandoned, morality collapses. Leadership truth of this chapter. Leaders must confront evil head on, direct. Silence enables darkness, and apathy destroys communities. The overall devotional summary: these 5 chapters reveal Israel's spiritual decline, and God attempts to raise deliverers. Chapter 15, Samson, divine strength through flawed vessels. Chapter 16, Samson's fall, covenant broken through compromise. Chapter 17, Micah, homegrown idolatry. Chapter 18, Dan, counterfeit religion becomes tribal identity. Chapter 19, moral collapse, sin is tolerated and it becomes sin unleashed. This section shows the consequences of abandoning holiness, rejecting covenant, and living without godly leadership. The downward progression is clear: compromise to idolatry, to corruption, to violence, to national crisis. The leadership takeaway is that leaders must address compromise early, guard covenant identity, reject self-made religion, lead people in God's truth and not in convenience, uphold righteousness, confront evil unflinchingly. Without such leadership, everyone does what is right in their own eyes, and chaos follows. Amen. I pray that you guys were blessed. We got one more day. Tomorrow we'll be tapping into Ruth, or entering in. We don't tap over here, but we'll be entering into the book of Ruth, and we will finish Ruth on Monday. So I will see you guys here again tomorrow at noon, God willing. God bless you.